This is the Salem Chapel British Methodist Episcopal Church, Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historic Site. This church, we began construction for this, my ancestors, between 1853 and 1855. They needed the larger church because so many were arriving by way of the Underground Railroad and free blacks were settling in Canada. Harriet Tubman escaped from slavery in 1849, and in December 1851, she arrived in St. Catharines. When she settled here at that time, she arrived with 11 freedom seekers. She was a Methodist when she was enslaved, and that's how she became acquainted with this church. After she settled here, she returned back to the United States a number of times. She was recruited to go back and find someone's loved one and bring them back to St. Catharines. After 1851, this became her base of operations. The church was used as a meeting house, so a lot of abolitionist activity and civil rights activity. But first and foremost, it was a house of worship. Harriet Tubman said the only reason why she could do what she was doing, going back and forth to the south and rescuing people, was because God was her guide. So she had strong faith in the Lord. Everything she did was based on God's word. She spoke to him daily, whether it was in this church, in her home, when she was out in the forest, it didn't matter. Tubman always asked for God's guidance. The Salem Chapel today is the only National Historic Site in the city of St. Catharines. We are actually a provincial historic site as well as a municipal historic site. The Salem Chapel is actually two tiers, religious first and foremost. Our second tier is tourism. We received our first visitors who were interested in the history of the Salem Chapel, to my knowledge, in December 1960. This past summer, we've seen about 4,000 people come through the church, which is absolutely amazing. So that's what helps us survive and keep the church doors open. Without the tourism, the church probably would have been closed 30 years ago. But the tourism dollars help us keep the church doors open, to keep it a house of worship, and it helps us pay our bills through the winter. But it's definitely not enough to help us repair the church. We started a GoFundMe campaign that launched in late September, and that's to help with the preservation and restoration of the church. We've had one major restoration project since the church was built, and that took place in 1957. A lot of the exterior wood is rotting, it's deteriorating. Our awning is being held up by two poles, so that needs to be replaced. Our gable, parts of it need to be replaced. We have windowsills that need to be replaced. Inside the church, we have our lower level windows that have never been finished. We have two lower steps that need to be replaced. We have our upstairs balcony that needs some plank boards replaced. So there's a lot of small projects. But what's most important after the awning is we need cable wires or earthquake straps to run through the attic as well as underneath the sanctuary floor. And that's just to hold the frame of the church together. With the GoFundMe page for emergency work, we're trying to raise $100,000. For me, this church means everything as a parishioner. It's important for me to maintain this church because it's part of my ancestral history. It's important to me personally because I get to be a keeper of culture or stand guard and, preserve the history and the narrative of those that came before me. It's important to all Canadians because it's part of our history.